Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a fantastic show today where we're going to kind of be all over the place and dealing with some universal translators, but we'll get to that little secret in a second. However, I definitely can't do this one alone. So as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how you doing?
Zach, I am wonderful. And it is a great day to be doing a podcast with you as usual. And, it's interesting that you always start off, you say, we're going to have a great show, but we haven't done the show yet, And so we're not like, you have so much faith in me, Zach. My hat is off to you. I'm not wearing a hat. It is off. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. Without you, we are nothing. So thanks to the listeners out there who are in listening podcast land. Remember, we're on Bufnagle, bufnagle.com, Twitter, Instagram, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, all those places. Hey, if we need to be on a place, let us know and we will get it on there. If you are new to our podcast, hey, thanks for coming. We are glad you are here. Give us 4 episodes and we'll give you a reason to come back. We'll give you something exciting that we're talking about. And remember, tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. And then somewhere on your podcast machine, there's a subscribe button or a follow button or one of those special buttons. Hit that button and you'll be alerted when new Bufnagle stuff is available, and leave us a 5-star review. And if you do, I get pudding. Zach, tell them about how this episode is going to be so fantastic.
Yeah, so as you know, it is November, and in November there is a very big dinner that happens on the 4th Thursday of November, and that is Thanksgiving.
Oh.
No. But today we're not going to be talking about Thanksgiving. Instead, we're going to talk about the concept of if you could have anybody over for dinner, who would you have? And we're going to discuss, the famous people we would bring in, the people, we want to sit down and have a conversation with, get a, poke their brain a little bit. And learn a little bit more about life.
Yeah. So this came up and you and I we said, okay, so let's do this. Let's make the list here. And then we got back together to talk about what was on the list. And I said, well, the 6 people I'd like to have for dinner, I'd like to have my wife, my kids, and my grandkids. Boom, that'd be done.
Well, right? That's more than 6 people, right?
Wife, 1, 3 kids. That's 3. Makes 4 total, plus 2 grandkids right now. I get 6. I'm right.
So you're gonna get rid of the in-laws, the daughter-in-law and the son-in-law. They're not invited.
Oh shoot! Okay, no, See, I knew I was counting that wrong.
So okay, yeah, I mean,
okay, we'll take the. I see. Then I don't know. See that, but didn't you have the same answer?
Well, yeah, my answer was like I put down one person. We'll get back to them in a second. But if you're a fan of the show, you probably already know who it is. But we'll spoil that for you in future a little bit. But I just put down, I just want to hang out with my friends and have dinner and be present and be with them because they're my friends.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. If I could have dinner with anybody, I want to have dinner with people I want to have dinner with. Okay, so then we had to decide, okay, we're going to change this condition a little bit. And we're going to say, you're going to have dinner with your family and friends. And then we thought, well, maybe we invite extra people. But I don't want to invite extra people because then I have to talk to them when I could talk to my friends. So the idea is you're sitting there waiting. You have an hour to kill waiting for a plane or something like that. And you can have a drink or a dinner or a conversation with somebody. Give me a handful of people, 6 or so, that you think you would like to have a conversation with. And we started brainstorming these, and I came up with a zillion of them, Zach, but you came up with fewer than a zillion, right?
I was, I think, a lot more focused with my selection criteria. You kind of just did a who's of what's in famous people of Rafe's brain.
These were people that were in the brain. They each have their own little room for various reasons. I made 2 lists actually. I had the list of the people that would answer the question, that I would answer the question with. And then I had a secondary list of these are people that I guess are on the backup list. Can you have a backup list? And
I
the
don't know.
backup
What's
list.
your list?
Well, and then I want to. I guess I got to ask this question too about this situation. Is let's say you pick a famous person, and I'm gonna pick a famous person that neither of us chose. I think. Let's say you pick. Let's say you pick Abe Lincoln. Okay, so when is it that you get to talk to Abe Lincoln?
I mean, you get to decide. It's like what you wear in heaven. It's the same question of, if I'm in heaven, I'm going to wear a hockey jersey. If I'm talking to Abe Lincoln, he's going to be 27 and a half, and he's going to be wearing two hot top hats, and an upside down pineapple cake is the thing he's bringing to dinner. Like, I get to
Okay.
choose the situation.
Well, okay, but that's the thing. He's 27, so maybe at 27, I think the best Abe Lincoln was probably the Abe Lincoln like the night they were going to the play. I mean, that's probably as like he was. What do you call it? He was peaking at that time, right? I think you want to get all these people at their peak, but some of them at their peak. Okay, so I picked one of the guys that I had one on the list, but I couldn't figure out how to do the list. Is Maximilian Kolbe. Okay, and I don't know if everybody knows who he is. He's a saint. Right, he was to cut it short. He was a priest in World War II. He was arrested by the Nazis. He was in the concentration camp at one of the bad ones. They were all bad ones, right? And somebody escaped from the cell block he was in, and in that cell block, if somebody escaped, then the Nazis pulled 10 guys at random from the group, and they were executed by starvation in a chamber. And one guy said, "Don't take me. I have a wife and I have a family." And then Colby went to the commandant and said, "I want to take that guy's place." Right. And he went and he went into, he took the guy's place. He gave himself up, and he led the other 9 into the chamber, and they all died. And like 10 days later, whatever it is, when they opened him up, 9 of them were dead. Colby was 99% dead, and they killed him by injecting him with some bad stuff. All right. But that's, so there's a guy I'd want to talk to, but like to really talk to him at his peak, I'd have to talk to him in the chamber, right? I mean, that's when he achieved the thing that made him knowledgeable to me, was at that level. And that's the thing, is I'm trying to figure out, where do we talk to these people, but we'll address all of them as we go through. Okay, so that's one of my guys that's there, is Maximilian Kolbe, but not really, because
because he's at your dinner. But I also think it goes back to like the what you wear in heaven. But he's at his peak self of, he is 100% healthy after doing whatever the thing was.
So
if it was like Napoleon, it would be like, you can talk to Napoleon after the Battle of Waterloo, after he experienced that, but without all of the physical injuries or any of the other things that he got because of that. He gets all of the knowledge with none of the negative bodily harm.
Right. So that's kind of like, it's like you chat with them when they have all of their life experience. I get to have
if that's when you want to chat to them. Maybe you don't want to talk to them. Maybe you don't want to talk to Napoleon before the Battle of Waterloo. Maybe you want to talk to him like after he got exiled the first time.
No, Waterloo was when he came back, right? And
yeah.
Okay, so you want to talk to him
twice.
Right. But at Waterloo though, he kind of came back, and he was on top of the charts at that point, right? So that's when you'd want to talk to him, at the top of the charts thing. But if you talk to him before that, do you get to tell him, dude, that if you go back to Waterloo, if you go back, you're gonna end up being, king of everything. You're gonna be, you could almost be an Egyptian. You could tell him that. And he'd be like,
"Yeah, any ideas now?
I'm going to Egypt." Yeah, so I'm not really sure about the conditions there, but there are a number of people that I like. Almost everybody we talk about, and and a lot of people we talk to on this show are people I would love to have dinner with. Think about the conversations we've had with our guests, with the big brain smart heads we've brought on. Right? Wouldn't you? I mean, I'd love to have all those guys. Imagine you had to have like a Bufnagle banquet, all right, and like all the guests come, all right, and then all the famous people we've talked about, we have somebody dress up and be them at dinner.
Well, I mean, I think you just ruined the Christmas special, but way to
go.
Well,
that's what we're working on. But there's a number of things. I mean, like, wouldn't you love to have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle?
Yes. I mean, Socrates will be there.
Yeah. Okay, so they'd be there, and I'd like to have C.S. Lewis and Tolkien there. I'd love to have Audrey Hepburn, just because she's Audrey Hepburn, all right, and Mark Wahlberg. right? Because I think that would just be hilariously funny. Can you imagine Mark Wahlberg and Audrey Hepburn? I mean, if there's one person that could put Mark Wahlberg in his place, I'll bet it'd be Audrey Hepburn. And I'll bet they'd get along great. I think it would be wonderful to witness. All right. And then I thought about like Marco Polo and Joan of Arc and Columbus and all those guys. And I thought about Kublai Khan, like the Khan Marco, like maybe we could Kublai Khan and Marco Polo and bring them back together and see what they talk about. I think that'd be great just to be a fly on the wall there. But none of those people made my six. None of those made my six. Did you have people on your secondary list?
I think Napoleon would be on my secondary list, looking at my list of 8 people. So whittling it down to 6 is pretty easy. I think there's the 6-7 spot. It's always a toss up. But
you're going to throw somebody out. I mean, think about how they would feel.
I mean, it is Napoleon. Yeah.
Napoleon was in Bill. If you haven't seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, you absolutely have to see it because it kind of answers this question of what would these guys be like in modern times.
Yeah. Remember when they took him with Napoleon?
Yeah.
A lot of things are talked about Napoleon's height. He was actually average height for the time. It's just, we have decided to create a narrative around Napoleon that he was short and therefore wanted to take over the world. Very much like Pinky and the Brain from Pinky and the Brain.
Exactly. There's another great Napoleon interaction in a time machine movie, and that is the movie Time Bandits, which we should probably discuss at another time for its presentation of the theory of evil. All right, because that's in there too. So Time Bandits will have to be another one. We may bring in Will Walker.
We have an expert on that show.
We do have an expert on that. So, but Napoleon was in that, and of course, he was portrayed in that movie at being about 4'6", right?
Yeah,
and that was part of the running joke, right? So, all right, so Zach, who's on your list? All right, I got one.
So the number one pick, which we spoilers to earlier. If you have, like I said, if you're a fan of the show, you obviously know who I'm going to take, and that would be obviously Alexander the Great. And because Alexander the Great was from Macedonia, he does not speak English, so we will be having a universal translator at the dinner.
So that I was flipping channels the other night, and I stumbled across an original Star Trek episode. Okay, with Captain Kirk when he was a young man, and all the Spock was young, and they were all wasn't the movies that came on. This was like 1966, 67 time frame, and there was so much in Star Trek that has come to reality. All right. They have their little communicators. We have our little communicators. They had a universal translator, Zach. It looked like a stick. All right. And when you would talk, it would convert. It would just, I think Spock explained it one time. He says something like it detects like universal principles and themes in your speech and your language, and it converts them to the universal themes that are in the other language, so you could translate like Romulan to Klingon to whoever else they met back to English, because in the future everybody in the Federation speaks English, right? So but it would do that. But we have the Google Translator now, right? You can actually do that. You talk into it, it converts it, and you show it to the other people, or it can read it to them, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it works quite the same way as the Star Trek one, but we have all that stuff. So you want to have Alexander the Great from Macedonia, speaking Macedonian with the universal translator. But when do you want him?
Well, he dies very young. So I think it depends on when, like there's obviously like you could do like right when he gets, the kingdom, and, before he kind of does the expansion of the Greek Empire. Or you could do it like right after he expanded the Greek Empire, before his death, when he was still relatively healthy.
Didn't he die out in the field? I mean, he was like,
so he did another
easy for you to say.
Expedition. Yeah, that one. He did that, and he died. He ended up dying in the field.
Was he killed, or just get like?
He was sick.
Yeah,
and there are medical experts who have debated what he died of.
It's hard to know exactly, right? Yeah. Do they have his body? Do they know his grave, or do they just?
I think they know his grave.
Okay.
but we don't need to spoil that to him. But I think I would like him after his like first major conquest, when he put himself on the map of like, hey, I am the king of Macedonia, and this is the Greek Empire. Even though those two things really don't make sense if you think about it. Well, yeah.
Well, you'd want to have his like his feelings about like I guess that's the thing that's interesting.
I would want to know like his idea on like what became of the Hellenistic age. So like the idea of like culture and philosophy and that type of flourishment, and like why did you want to go on this conquest? Why Egypt? Why Persia? Why these places? Like what interests you about them? What made them special? What were you chasing?
So do
What
you
were your
think?
dreams and desires beyond I am great and powerful?
So
Because
I mean,
he was his dreams and desires, when you compare him to someone like Caesar, who is a lot more military achievement focused. Alexander the Great was more or less like cultural focused, which is why there was the difference in the Greek and the Roman empires and the way that their cultures were and existed.
so that's the thing that's interesting about that because I always wonder if those guys were just if you would ask him why did you go east and conquer Persia or whatever he conquered. I don't know the whole story, but why did you go do that? And if he goes, well, what else would I do? I mean, that's what we do. Is that the answer? Is what we do, or
I
is the
don't.
answer, well, they had wealth and they had a warm water port, or they had,
Well, I
they had
mean, there was
slaves, or
the
what?
oracle. The oracle told him to go on a conquest. Like there's a lot like of like mythology that we talk about as like mythology in general, but for them it was like life. It was
It was the whole
this thing that
package.
affected like what they did. And like it would be cool to like see someone talk about like that type of experience with like me knowing like the history of the mythology behind some of all of that stuff as well. Like this is a tangent, but like
Well, that'll be new because we've
Hercules
never
most
done a
likely was
tangent.
a real person, despite the fact that he's a mythological figure. There was probably someone in ancient Greece named Hercules who did a bunch of fantastic feats. And this, as they've been passed down the line, we have created him into this bigger version of himself. So, like, if I get the opportunity to meet that guy, that would be really cool. But I don't know who that guy is, but I do know who Alexander the Great is, and he could fill the gaps and the holes to complete some of those stories. And for me, that would be exciting and that would be fun.
I was reading this thing recently. They said they found this big rock on one of these islands in the Mediterranean, and inscribed on the rock was something like, I. It said something. It was written in first person from the rock's perspective. Okay, and it was carved into the rock in Greek, and it said something like, in the year blah 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 blah, Tim the strong man lifted me over his head, is what it said. Okay, and this was in this big rock, and they found it buried somewhere, and this rock weighed like a gajillion pounds. I mean, it was really really heavy, and it was a rock. It wasn't like it was like a barbell with weights on it, and there was a guy with a weight belt, and there was like that mat, and and he had chalk on his hands. I mean, this was a big rock, and this guy lifted it over his head. And somebody's been studying like how manly the manly men were back then, and I forget exactly what the details were. And if you want, go look this up, and it's on the interwebs somewhere. But they built the ships. We have built replicas of the ancient Greek rowing ships,
Yep.
whatever those with the three sets of oars. All right, and there's stories of like King so and so said to go attack so and so, and then the next day he said, you know what, I don't think we should do that. So he dispatched another boat to chase down the first boat, and they averaged something like 18 miles an hour for 36 hours. And they take like the top rowers now, and they put them in that situation, and they can't compete. There's something about. I'm not saying they were giants, Zach, or that they were, that they were Ubermensch or something like that, but they were really big and really strong, and they did things that are mind-boggling to us.
Yeah, it helps the fact that they didn't sit at their computers all day and
What are you saying?
have their necks and their shoulders scrunched over, and they were out and doing things, and they had their ability to progress as a society was tied in their ability to move large rocks, more or less.
Yeah,
And
I hear you.
it was therefore people grew up doing that stuff, so you built strength at a younger age, and they didn't have chocolate peanut butter cups and Twizzlers and Diet Mountain Dews to
Hey,
keep them unhealthy.
we have proven that Diet Mountain Dew is actually a health food drink, but that's in a previous episode. All right, so you would do Alexander the Great.
Oh
All
yeah,
right. Okay, well that's good.
with the universal translator, obviously.
Yeah, we're going to have that because there's a number of people that speak a lot of different languages here coming up. All right, so Buzz Aldrin. All right, now Buzz Aldrin is the namesake for the character Buzz Lightyear in the Pixar Toy Story movies. But Buzz Aldrin was the second man to set foot on the moon after the more well-known Neil Armstrong. And Buzz Aldrin was known for being more of a character. Neil shot pretty straight and was the more politically correct guy, and Buzz was a little bit more of a radical. And I would love to have Buzz on there. Buzz once punched a guy at a signing event when the guy accused him of not having gone to the moon. And there's this interview, and this tells me everything I need to know about Buzz. There was this interview where they asked Buzz. They said, "Okay, so let's say you're in the spaceship, and you're orbiting the Earth, and you have an hour's worth of oxygen left, and the spacecraft stops working. What would you do if you only had an hour's worth of air left?" And they were kind of expecting him to say, "Well, I think I'd call, I'd get on the radio and I'd thank people, and I'd be." They were expecting some sort of philosophical response, and his response was, "Oh, I think I'd just work on the spacecraft. I think I'd fix the spacecraft," is what he said. And that, to me, that struck me as this attitude that I'm not going to accept defeat unless it's forced onto me, and I'm gonna work through it, and I'm gonna make the best of the situation I got. So I'd like Buzz Aldrin there, just because he's a character, and I think if there were free drinks, things would get very exciting.
So I should or should not invite someone to question the moon landing when
Yeah, well, you could
Buzz.
no, that would be very exciting, because if you did that, there would be we would want to put them at the
There
same
would be a
table.
ruckus.
It would be a ruckus, and there would be fisticuffs. But I tell you who would win. There's no question. Even Buzz Aldrin, as old as he is, he may even be dead now for all I know. Is he dead, Zach? I haven't even looked it up. Doesn't really matter. But that would be interesting if Buzz Aldrin were there. So who else you got?
Yeah. So the next one I'm going to go with is a contemporary, someone who is currently living, in TJ Perenara, who is the New Zealand rugby team's scrum half.
The New Zealand that team is called the All Blacks, right?
Correct.
And they are a really, really good rugby team.
Yes.
And he's the scrum half.
Yep.
How do you get to be scrum half of the All Blacks?
You born in New Zealand, or we'll go born in New Zealand for the short version, and then you're very good at rugby, and yeah. So like me, but like born in New Zealand and better.
Yeah. Okay. So but he's got to have good stories about.
Yeah. He's a very positive, emotional, mature individual who he does a lot of work and talk on meditation, mindfulness, and being present, and like what it means to connect to your family and your peers, and being present with them, and like just be able to listen to him on that stuff, and then also like listen and pick his brain about like how he plays and what he looks for, and like kind of the things that goes through his mind as he's playing at the highest level, and the things he does to help his teammates so that they can be successful in whatever they do. So just like having that conversation would be fun, it would be light, it would be it would be good, it would be good to have.
It would be full of good.
Yeah,
we like good. All right. So and he's like, I mean, there's a long line of very good New Zealand scrum halves. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So all right. So the scrum half is kind of like the quarterback on the team. If you similar, it kind of sets up the play and starts the action, and he's the guy. Well, I have a guy that is a similar sports kind of character. Growing up in Wisconsin, we've talked about this in the past, in the mid 70s, being born in the mid 60s, Bart Starr was a man of heroic proportion. And I got to meet him in Kansas City at a shoe store. He was signing posters. All right. And I met him when he was, I don't know, he probably had been about 60. He's getting older. And there was this line out the door to meet Bart Starr, even in Kansas City. And Kansas City, who they beat in the first Super Bowl. Here's Bart Starr, and everybody loves him there. And everybody I've talked to about him says he's a wonderful person. And so I go to the thing, and he's standing there at this table, like a very tall table where he's signing. You get a poster and he signs it and he shakes your hand and you go on. And as I approach him, he says, who should I make this out to? I said, make it out to my son. And he starts signing it. And of course he signs it and he writes it so I can read it, which was amazing. Right. He said, yes, sir, to me as a young man when he was older. And I said a thing like, wow, they ought to get you a chair to sit on or something, because you've been standing here like 2 hours signing these things. And he said to me, as he shook my hand, he said, well, I figure you guys were standing to see me, so the least I could do was to stand when I met you. And I was like, holy cow, what a great guy. And everybody I've met, I had a boss who was on the who was drafted by the Packers and didn't make the team. But at the during training camp, Bart Starr was coach back then in the early 80s. And this guy, Bart Starr, apologized to him one time, like a fourth string tight end, saying, sorry, we didn't get you as many plays in that preseason game as we wanted to. We'll be getting to you next week. We'll make sure you don't give up the ship now. We'll take care of you. And, and this was like, he said he never had to do that. And everybody I talked to said that when they met him at a restaurant or a signing event, this guy was off the charts nice. They said he's the nicest man I know. And he won 5 championships in 7 years, right? So like Tom Brady on steroids. Zach, who else you got?
Wow, I can't, I'm going to go back to the history well again, and I'm going to pull up James Madison, and we're going to discuss how he's overcredited for the Bill of Rights.
Oh, you're going to bring it up. You're going to be like,
I'm going to bring up my thesis.
But you're going to wait. You're going to come up. Okay, so this is the question of where you hit him, right? So is this like when he's writing the Bill of Rights, or right afterwards?
I think this is after the Bill of all. This is after what we now refer to as the Bill of Rights is signed and added to the Constitution. So 2 weeks after.
2 weeks after, and he's pretty happy because there were 12, right? And 10 of the 12 made it to the original. They're in the Bill of Rights now, and 2 of them didn't quite get enough signatures. Yep. One of them just passed in like 1990 something.
Yep.
Right. So that one passed, and then there's the 12th one, which still doesn't have.
It won't ever, because it doesn't
it's
fit
obsolete
in today's political environment. But it would be cool because I wrote my thesis on James Madison and the Bill of Rights, and I talked a lot about the people Madison was influenced by in writing the Bill of Rights. So for me, it would be this really cool thing. I talk a lot about history of like talking to, how did he hear about the ideas of, the Leviathan and, these other Enlightenment philosophy ideas from Europe, and, how he saw them fitting into the American political ecosystem and like those type of things. And like why he, relied on Ben Franklin or didn't rely on Ben Franklin for certain things. So why, Jefferson was, someone that he wrote with a lot while contemplating and putting these, 12 amendments together. Like I would love to have that conversation with him and to see, hopefully this more like graceful side of him, and like being like, hey, yeah, these people were really smart before me. Like, there's a lot of these political things going on. I want to see, American politics go in this way. And I think it would be really interesting story to like see that brain turning.
So he was, okay. So where was he from? Was he a Virginian?
Yes.
Okay. So he was a Virginian, and was he a Federalist?
He technically is a Federalist, but we don't need to go in that rant here.
Yeah, we can go whether or not there's an appropriate label or not, right? And whether
I wrote a thesis on this, so I'm kind of passionate. If you're not
got you.
aware,
I hear you. I'm not gonna. Because I think I agree with you. And there's all sorts of people can have debates about what the Federalists or Anti-Federalists did or didn't say, or what they wanted to say, or whether
both of them agreed principally in the same things. It's just the labels of media and portrayal of them, and now looking back on it as history and how we talk about it today.
Right. All right.
It is what it is. But like having someone like that and have him, have a conversation about, the things he learned from history. And then like, I've learned a lot from history, and like, it'd be nice to see that type of conversation and, environment to be a part of. And I think it would be very interesting to get a guy like that who was very smart and very young when he did that as well, just like Alexander the Great, and just kind of, see what their brain was at, like why they were pursuing what they were pursuing, what good they were chasing.
I hear you. I hear you. All right. So I will go into the Revolutionary well as well. And I'm going to pull out General, President, and then former President George Washington. And I think I'm going to get former President George Washington after he stepped away from long-term power after two terms as the first president. I will and when he's living on his farm along the Potomac, and then ask him what he's thinking, and then tell him, like, hey, let me tell you what's going to happen.
Would you spoil the future?
Well, I'm trying to think of how much, because if you've ever been to there's two airports in Washington D.C. There's Dulles, which is out away from the water there, right, from the Potomac, and then there's Reagan National, which is right on the river there, and there are parts of that airport that sit on land that George Washington owned, right? And to me, there's a museum at the airport, Zach. If you're ever stuck, like, go find the museum at Washington National, and then outside there are like ruins, like places like old. Here's like some old bricks, and here's a foundation of a thing that was a thing. I don't remember if that was actually on the Washington property or not, but it was. To me, that was. It really hits home when you're there, and you can see this is where they were, and that's where the Capitol was going to be, and you can see how they put all that together. I would just love to ask him, why'd you step away? Because there have been very few men in history that have been offered what is essentially unlimited power and have turned it down, right? And that, to me, is like, one was Cincinnatus, one was Washington. Jesus, of course, turned it down, right? But that's the making of the Western hero, is that you're offered it and you turn it down, and the recognition that you're going to turn it down makes you pretty much the only one who is worthy of actually having it, which is the great irony of power, is the only ones who should have it are those who don't want it. And so I would like to talk to him about that, and see what he, talk to him about how did you come to, what's your understanding of freedom? What's the deal, man? How come you can't get it through your heads that having slaves is bad? Right? I'd like to ask that. I was like, tell me about your family, and tell me about the farm and the plantation, and then we'll chat. We'll have some dinner, and then just don't fall into the creek when you're doing your fence check, because you're going to get sick and die. That's what I thought. All right, that's my foray into the revolution.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a step back from the revolution and reference a couple other revolutions, and I'm going to go over to Russia, and I'm going to pick out Catherine the Great, and then while I'm there, might as well pick out Rasputin.
Okay, so Catherine the Great and Rasputin.
Rasputin, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So and that, when was now? Were they?
They were not contemporaries. No.
Okay. So when was
Catherine the Great? Was late 1700s.
Okay.
She was the last reigning empress of Russia,
right.
And she is regarded as one of the most impactful queens throughout history.
All right, and she did just like
she was just the coolest person you could probably find running a country. Like, she just did it all. She was very politically astute. She was understanding of the Russian political climate. She was very able to maneuver things. She had good relationships with other countries. She did a lot of different things. She is not talked about enough throughout history. I think she would just be fun to have at dinner. She'd probably have some good stories for us.
Maybe we could sit her with Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah.
All right. Or Audrey Hepburn.
Audrey Hepburn.
Or Katharine Hepburn.
Whatever works.
No,
right?
Audrey Hepburn's better.
Okay. Yeah,
right, and then Rasputin.
Yes. Famous Rasputin. He was early 1900s. He was a minister to the Tsar. He was the king of pseudoscience and everything else in between. just a weird, goofy dude. I think just like having him around would just be fun to see everyone else interact with him, and he would have definitely good stories. Like the things that he is credited to and uncredited to and credited to uncredited with, like it's just crazy. There's some weird stories that he's always at the center of it, especially when it comes to Russia around World War One, and just having him around would be fun.
So he was in the background with the Tsar Nicholas II,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he kind of knew the inside scoop there and did what he needed to do to. Did he have a lot of power then in that administration?
He didn't have power, but he had influence, and he had
Influence.
massive influence.
All right, and then in the Disney movie Anastasia, he is like a wizard or something, right?
Yes.
And then he controls things through evil spells and stuff.
Yes.
But
Very much like he probably
true.
did in real life.
Yeah.
There is this magical fantasy element of him that follows him wherever he goes. So
really, okay.
Yeah, so having that around, I think would be really cool.
All right. Well, I'm going to go to author and wise gentleman Andrew Klavan, who is a mystery writer and a podcast host, and a man that is.
So he's like you.
Well, you know what? He's better than I am, Zach. There's absolutely no question. This guy is off the charts smart. This guy he's an author, but he knows so much literature and history and philosophy about the West, and I've learned so much over the last 5 or 6 years from him, from his writings and podcastings. He is a secular Jew who became converted to Christianity because he discovered that all the great works of the West sit on Bible stories, and so he wanted to read Bible stories, and he ticked off his dad by buying a copy of the Bible as a young Jewish boy. So he's got some wonderfully funny stories. He's got a great insight into being a Christian in the modern world, and I think he's got a great approach to approaching things how they are now in the world. And I would love to have him at dinner. I think it'd be fascinating. So author Andrew Klavan would be there, and then I have 2 more, Zach.
Yeah, I got 1 more. So okay. I will trade you an author for another author.
Okay, give me an author.
And I would be going with Vex King. He is English. He's an Englishman, but he is originally from India, so he's an Indian Englishman, I think is the proper.
He brought good food to England.
Yeah. So he was part of that whole thing. But he is a current contemporary writer on mindfulness and positivity and like those concepts and ideas and how to incorporate them in your life, and just being able to build up people around you and yourself to be able to positively impact more people, and kind of those ideas that we talk about a lot in the show. A lot of things I talk about personally with my friends, and just who I am as a person, and just like having someone like that at dinner, someone that I I agree with a lot with what he has to say, very similar to how you mentioned Klavan. Having those conversations, being able to pick someone's brain like that, and maybe take away something and add it to my writings or my speakings or anything else that I do would be really cool to do. And he's a very calm, and I think if I would message him through the interwebs, he might even respond and would be up to getting dinner. So there's a chance.
He might even he might demand that we get good British food.
Yes, which is just Indian food.
Indian food. I got you. Okay, and my last 2, Zach, they go together. They are a match set, and they are Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And I think I would try to get them. Not once they completed the journey, but like almost done with the journey. So
like on the way back.
On the way back, right? So like when they started coming back, right toward the end, if you remember the story, they're coming back down the Missouri. They're going with the current. They're going with the wind. It's all downhill once you get to the top, right? So they're getting, but they've been gone almost 3 years, and it is. I would like to know what did you like? How scary was it? Because I have this picture that, and I think this is probably false, that as they left St. Louis and started going up the river, it got more and more, well, it got less and less civilized to them, right? Less familiar to them. But I'm thinking that it wasn't. Now I've changed that mindset. I used to think it was like this gradient of getting less civilized, but I think it just was a drop off. And at some point, probably a couple days out of St. Louis, from that point on, it was the same with regard to civilization. There was pretty much nothing that they were familiar with. I mean, they knew there were Indian tribes that were living there. They knew some of them were friendly. They could do some exchanging and some barters, and they were met with animals and rivers and stuff they had never seen before. But once they got out, it was just all out. It wasn't like Central Montana was worse than Central North Dakota or Central Oregon. I mean, it was all the same amount of wilderness. It was nonstop wilderness with very, very little human interaction. And when you read the Undaunted Courage book, you read how much, I guess, how they really loved the adventure of that. And when we did the episode on that, that's what I just remember more and more about that is how adventurous that was, and how they felt that this was like going to the moon for these guys. And I would love to hear what they have when they're coming back. What do you want to do when you get back here? Are you going to write up the journals? Can you show me the map? Tell me about where you shot the grizzly bear, and tell me about Sacagawea and Charbonneau, and tell me about when you met Cameaway. I want to hear these stories from them and find out what their impressions are, because all we have now is writings about their writings, right? And I would love to hear it from them. I would love to have Lewis and Clark. I think that would be that table of 6, and then I could just hover around and listen. I think it'd be phenomenal.
I think, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think we would be pretty good at planning a dinner party. Dinner party by Bufnagle.
It's like, yeah, the Bufnagle Feast is what we'll have, and we'll invite folks there. It is, Zach. I think coming back to this, when I was like I think I said this earlier tonight, is I would love to have the people. Like, I'm just loving all the people we get to talk to and all the things we get to learn and talk about doing this show. And I don't know what I think about how much richer my life is after you twisted my arm and made me do this podcast. This is a wonderful thing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And we get to, celebrate that and talk about that more and more and more. And when we do that, we get to share these stories. We get to share these adventures, and we would be doing that with a dinner party. So if someone ever asks you the question of who would you want to have dinner with, and your answer is like a Kardashian, like, what type of benefit and value is that going to give you? And if it is a good benefit and value, then you can have them over. But if it's not going to enrich your life in some way, then what's really the point?
Well, think about the Kardashians, though, because I would love to get the Kardashians one-on-one, without cameras, like in a situation where you could really know them, because I'll bet they're real people, Zach. I bet almost all those celebrities that get put up on those pedestals and kind of mocked, they have a pedestal for being mocked, right? And I'll bet they're real people, and I bet they have real stories. They went to school. They have friends. They eat breakfast. They have stories. I'd love to hear their stories, the real stories. Barbara Walters used to do those one-on-one stories with people where she'd go behind the scenes. But still, that's a media thing. I'd love it when you knew that the guard was down and you could really talk to these people, because they are all Imago Dei. And I want to see what they are reflecting.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. So again, thank you all for listening. I want to remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.